Yo, I am Vida, and you are tuned into the Mindset Magic School podcast. Thank you for being here on this planet and also in this conversation. We hope to have you around for a while, so feel free to subscribe for all updates. Mindset Magic School aims to support you in cultivating peace, love, and healing in your life as well as in this world. You can learn more at our website, mindsetmagic.school. Your soul is completely welcome here. Thank you again for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the episode and catch me over on Instagram. In this episode, I share a little bit about my upbringing as well as dive into a conversation about solitude, as well as really invite you to sharpen your blade. More on that soon. Thanks for tuning in. Have you ever felt like you were born in the incorrect marathon? Like race, like jogging, biking, swimming, and perhaps you maybe feel like you did not get the memo regarding the proper shoes to wear for the event. Or maybe you didn't receive the proper, size shorts to wear. Or maybe you forgot your water bottle, or maybe you didn't even know that you needed a water bottle. Maybe you do not know the path to get to where you seek to be because you haven't yet found anyone to give it to you, because you don't have the models for behavior in your life to be what you truly wish to be in the world. If that's you, that's also me. Where most of my high school peers got cars when they graduated as like a celebratory thing, I got like a $100 bike that was later stolen like 2 weeks later. Where most of my high school peers had dinner every night with their families, I was living on my own with my brother at 15 and eating if I remembered to, or if my grandma or mother called and offered for me to eat with them. That is until I found one of my best friends in high school whose family basically took me into their own and had me over for dinner almost every single night. Now, where most kids went home to study in middle school, I actually spent my evenings driving with my mom to mental health facilities to visit a loved one. Where most kids were having TV and dinner time with their family, I was dealing with cops at my house, breaking up fights when I was in elementary school. Or maybe that it was one of the nights there was an ambulance at my house driving my brother to the hospital after he had had a really grand mal seizure. Where most of my friends, actually probably all of them, had and still have both of their parents living together. Mine got divorced after a tumultuous 17-year-long marriage when I was in the 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade. I could share a lot more of these stories with all the same almost kind of duality-like traits where I was existing in a reality that I did not feel like an active member in. And what I mean to say is there's this whole world spinning around me where everything seemed to fit perfectly. And I always carried the understanding that my puzzle piece was just a little bit different. My home life was a little bit different. How I embody myself is a little bit different. The energy that I exude into the world is a little bit different. All of these sorts of things. Maybe that's you also. Maybe you're tuned into this because you resonate with that aspect of myself. And I'll be digging deeper into all of these stories and topics in my upcoming book titled Soul Strength, due out early next year. That's a little bit of a self-promotion plug. Shout out to me. Yeah. And I want to let you know that I'm sharing all of this because I'm painstakingly aware of the fact that the more you see me fully, the more you will understand the wisdom of what I am offering you in all Mindset Magic School offerings, including this podcast and programs that I am launching, as well as the masterminds that I've been putting on, as well as basically anything you see from me moving forward. You'll be able to understand where the wisdom actually comes from and what sort of trenches I've dug myself out of. I share this with you with the intention to also allow you to hear yourself in my story and the parts of our histories that we typically aren't vocal about. Maybe the parts of you that you hold shame around, or the parts of you that make you feel like your exterior hardens when people seek to get close to you or seek to hear you be vulnerable. Maybe these parts of you that feel like trauma response when someone wants to hug you, or maybe these parts of yourself that feels like a trauma response when there's a heightened state of stress going on in the world around you. And also, maybe these are the parts of you that have your heart be the biggest part of your body. These parts of you are what have all of your loved ones and anyone who knows you or comes in contact with you, has them know the depth of your compassion as well as your unconditional love, and how powerfully you can show up in the face of any adversities that get thrown at you and still remain in your peace and in your love, regardless of what's going on around you, regardless of how people are spreading their narratives about you or wishing to engage with you and, glean some of the energy from you. These are the parts of you that are also your divine treasure as you're existing here on this planet. And I wish for you to see that, yes, you've been through something, as well as it is your gift. And that is why I share all these parts. And I want to share a little bit deeper about solitude and all these parts of my history that I've been through. I became painstakingly aware of the fact that I was actually mostly alone. Yes, I was actively with folks in these experiences, and also I felt very alone. As well as I was often alone. After my parents got divorced, I was living with my mom, who worked a few different jobs just to keep the roof over our heads. Shout out to my mom. I would go to school and then I'd come home. And because she was not home, she was fearful of me going out into the world and adventuring around, although I did sometimes. And I did get in trouble. I was often alone in this 4-bedroom household that her and my dad had cultivated together. And I did not know what to do with myself. So I recall in middle school diving heavily into music. Anytime I got a 4.0 on my report card, which was every semester or every time we received grades, I don't remember what they called them in middle school. But I was doing my work, so to speak. And every time I came home with a 4.0, my mom blessed me with anything that I wanted. And the only thing that I wanted was musical equipment and gear. So I went from having, the beautiful upright piano that I had, and then I had a DJ gear. They were belt-driven turntables. It was like a DJ in a box kind of kit. I don't recall where we got it from. I think it was like at the local music store where I later took guitar lessons at, because I ended up finding my mom's acoustic guitar from when she was in high school in her attic one day when I was home alone in this big old house. And I definitely started getting really, I don't know, what's the words? Started getting cabin fever, right? So I started just kind of looking around everywhere, and it led me to the attic. So I found her guitar, and this is besides the point. But anyways, anything I did that was awesome in school, I got an instrument for. So I basically ended up having a full stock, like, one-person band. And I could talk more about that at a different time. What I'm sharing all this for is to really touch on my solitude. And in those moments, my solitude became time for me to sharpen my blade, so to speak, right? I began to really dive into practicing these different instruments. I began to dive into practicing beat matching and practicing different things with DJing. I really, really dove into writing poetry at this time. It was the first time I wrote poetry. I believe I was in middle school. And anyways, so going from that sort of solitude to, continuing forward and moving to Arizona after being homeless at 22 and the person I moved there with was always at work, and when I wasn't at school, I was at home in my solitude. And that's actually when I wrote one of my favorite albums, as well as like a fan favorite album. It's called Negative Space. It's the only long play album I've released, so the only LP I've yet released. And so being out in Arizona by myself, that was a whole different world. I was culture shocked. My partner was always at work. I would visit them. I landed, a job there, where I was making about $200 a month, which was pretty wild. And I was going to school every day, taking 3 buses to get to class. If I missed one, I had to wait a whole few hours to get on another one. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think this was before Lyft, but I sure as hell didn't have the budget for Lyft or Uber, right? So what I did was I really looked at, well, what can I do to process all of these feels that are coming up? And all that I could think to do was dive deeper into my work, dive deeper into my art. So I began to write. I began to produce an album called Negative Space. I began to really start writing. At that point, it was like blogs for Apsit Omen. I began to channel everything that I was going through into my what I feel to be my purpose, which is to make an impact and to make a difference and to help folks heal and to help folks lift up and navigate difficult times, right? And so with that said, it took me a while to actually get to that point of awareness. For a while, I was in the trenches of like depression, anxiety, noticing that I felt pretty freaking lonely being all the way out there in Arizona. I was going through some family changes. My grandma was, her health was deteriorating. She was my best friend. I would call her and talk to her every day. And, things started to shift, and I started to feel the emotions from those shifts, which is natural because we're humans. And so I got to this point where I was like, I experienced hitting sort of a rock bottom out in Arizona, to be honest. And the rock bottom really showed me who were the solid players in my life, as well as who wasn't, as well as what I really needed to do to get to the point in which I could experience happiness in my life. And I began that journey there in Arizona, and I've continued it moving forward. I made a commitment to myself out there to only do what elevates my spirit and to only do what makes me completely enthralled to be alive. Anything that does not, I give myself full permission to step away from, to end mid-conversation with, any of those sorts of things. I just let it go. And in Arizona, I got to that point, right? However, it took that difficult rock bottom emotionally to get there. And I've always been a fan. I've shared this already before. Like, I've studied like Eastern philosophies. Western folks typically call them religions. The studies that I've studied about them don't refer to them as religions. They refer to them as like thought practices, or they refer to them as just practices. Spiritual practices, right? So when I was out there, I was rereading this book called The Joy of Living. I'll link it in the comment section below for you to, in the description below for you to check out. It's one of my favorite books. I recommend it to everyone, right next to the Tibetan Art of Positive Thinking, which I believe I talked about in the intro episode of this podcast. I'll link that one also below. But those 2 books, I was rereading The Joy of Living, and The Joy of Living, it merges Buddhist understandings and beliefs with science. The person who wrote it shares like parallels between the two, right? And there's this one section in the book that talks about the person being in solitude. And that's something that Buddhist monks do, is they seek their solitude. When we also look at like Shaolin monasteries, it is a secluded sector of practice, right? So the mindset that I adopted while I was in Arizona around all of this was that I was giving myself, as well as the universe was granting me access to the time and space to sharpen my blade. Buddhist monks when they are in their solitude, they're practicing their meditations, they're practicing their various practices. When folks are at Shaolin monasteries, those folks are also practicing their meditations, as well as they're practicing their physical form of meditation, their kung fu. And with that, I kept in mind that I was sharpening my blade. And I used that terminology because I pictured someone way back, like medieval times, like actively chiseling their blade, right? Like if you look at how the old swords are made, they would heat them and then, pound away at them to get them into the shapes that they are. And it was someone's job to do that. Like they had the blacksmiths, they had folks that were woodworkers, and then they had folks that were making the metals back in the day. And so that really stuck out to me and resonated fully in my body when I took that on as a mindset, when I applied that as a practice of mental focus. Instead of staying focused in the energetic or emotional or physical space that I was residing in, I took my mind to somewhere that I could bring all the other parts of me to, that inspired me, as I said, my body fully activated when I thought about. And even now, as I'm recording this podcast and remembering those moments, I'm fully activated again. I'm sharpening my blade even more as I'm recording this podcast for you to listen to. So sharpen your blade. That's the message I want to leave you with. If you listen to the beginning of this podcast, and if you had memories and images and thoughts come to your awareness about things you've been through, whether in your childhood years, your middle adulthood, maybe you're a little bit down, maybe you are more elevated in the path than the rest of us here, and maybe you got more gray hairs than us, and you got more wisdom to glean, and wherever you are on the spectrum of humaning, sharpen your blade. In this moment you could begin it, and in this moment you could begin to shift what you have been through as a story of destitute and being broken or whatever, to really finding how your story is your gift. And all the story that I shared with you earlier, the gift that I gleaned most from it was to sharpen my blade at all moments, to always allow myself the opportunity and the access to practicing, to knowing that there is no right or correct or positive way to be a human, that there merely is the existence of a human being in a human vessel, and that we get to figure it out along the journey. Right? So give yourself the permission to shift upon the journey if at any moment you so desire. So we've touched on a little bit of my upbringing, about solitude and mine in particular, as well as sharpening your blade. I hope this podcast episode served you. And like always, I will be ending with a verse. This one is called Welcome to the Hell Zone. It's a remix to a song by Spooky Black. I wrote it when I first moved to Sacramento, when I was reminding myself to sharpen my blade. And this is how it goes. Still battling these hunger pains, but I've been eating more, just focused on my future. Yeah, I'm still thinking forward. Once I hit rock bottom, I knew there was nowhere left to go, but that shit's been a lonely road, just filling your energy out in this ether, wondering if it'll lead me back to my center. My home, what I foresee can't be the only way this ends. Digging apart my skin to reveal what's within. Just let my demons be, cause where they go I can breathe. I said let my demons be, cause where they go I can breathe. Watch the dreams I weave, they're yours if you seek. Writing a better story, even if I can't believe in it every morning. It's so much bigger than I and you and you. Don't let these others let you get that confused. It is so much bigger than I and you and you. Don't let these others let you get that confused. There is always hope. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't checked out my music yet, it is available on all platforms digitally for purchase as well as streaming. It's vidakillz, 2 words. Check the description for the links I mentioned, as well as a link to the producer that made the beat that you hear on the beginning and ending of every episode. His name is Ursus. He's one of my dear friends. And again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for existing. Sharpen your blade. Peace. I am filled with deep gratitude in knowing you tuned into this conversation. Please leave a rating on this episode, subscribe, and share this podcast with your loved ones. This is your host, Vida, and you just listened to the Mindset Magic School podcast. You can find out more about us at mindsetmagic.school. Follow me over on Instagram for behind-the-scenes updates and deeper connection. Hop on our mailing list to hear about new courses and events first. Again, your soul is completely welcome here. Much love.